When this iconic sequence from Charlie Chaplin's 1925 feature The Gold Rush was first shown in Berlin, the audience was so wildly enthusiastic that the print was wound back and the scene repeated in what critic Luc Sante calls a rare instance of a cinematic encore. The anecdote is evidence of Chaplin's staggering popularity and unprecedented global reach, for in a time when movies were silent and language was not a barrier to their distribution or enjoyment, Chaplin's iconic tramp character was, according to Sates, the world's most recognizable figure of any sort, with Chaplin himself following only a little ways behind. He was one of the foremost fathers of the motion picture, creating not only the most popular and beloved cinema icon of the 20th century, but a catalog of short and feature films that are as entertaining and relevant today as they were nearly 100 years ago. What must be the ambitions of a man who achieved such heights as these? And for an artist whose work dealt heavily with the injustices of capitalism and economic inequality, always returning to the core central theme of looking for the heart of a person rather than judging by race, class, or status, what ethical principles or ideas guided his extraordinary life? In his 1964 autobiography, Chaplin wrote that he had no design for living, no philosophy. Whether sage or fool, we must all struggle with life. His personal narrative bears this out as, beginning with his childhood as the impoverished son of a mentally unstable single mother, where nothing, including housing, was ever consistent, Chaplin lived a thoroughly unpredictable life, one that took him from the streets of London, a story David Robinson calls the last great Victorian autobiography, comparing Chaplin's life to the characters of Charles Dickens, to unprecedented levels of success in America, to universal love and adoration, and ultimately to Cold War-era controversy and eventual expulsion from the nation that gave him fame. Despite the many ups and downs of his professional and personal lives, Chaplin presented his own ambitions as modest, his successes painted almost as happenstance, his failures and hardships as unfortunate but never insurmountable. He wanted to do good work, to make good films, and hold himself to a high personal standard, but he did so with the reserve of personal fulfillment rather than the egomania of asserting oneself above all others. He did not necessarily seek out fame or fortune. Enormous record-breaking paychecks were successfully negotiated, but money is not paramount in his personal narratives, and happiness for Charlie Chaplin was ultimately exemplified by the desire for contentedness. He closes his autobiography by writing, "With such happiness, I sometimes sit out on our terrace at sunset and look over a vast green lawn to the lake in the distance, and beyond the lake to the reassuring mountains, and in this mood think of nothing but enjoy their magnificent serenity." This seems the clearest summation of Chaplin's ambitions, not fame or fortune, but merely a sustainable and empowering sense of fulfillment, one that makes sense for a man who grew up living a wildly non-contented, unpredictable life. Chaplin never forgot the struggles of his childhood, and if they informed his ambitions and personal life, they fueled his ethics doubly so, and those ethics, in turn, drove the substance of his filmmaking. Chaplin's movies present the desire for personal happiness as paramount to the human condition, something all individuals should not only be permitted to act upon, but something all individuals should be cognizant of when dealing with others. Social, political, and ethical issues like these always informed his comedy, stemming from Chaplin's belief that comedy stemmed from identification, from understanding the human condition and presenting scenarios that audiences could relate to on one level or another. A thing that puts a person in an embarrassing predicament, Chaplin wrote, must always be perfectly familiar to an audience, or else the people will miss the point entirely. As Chaplin's success and stardom grew, ethical issues came closer and closer to the forefront of his art. When he was successful enough to coast, to play things simple and make safe, easily digestible slapstick comedies, Chaplin's artistic ambition instead grew, with his formal and narrative innovations matched in full force by the depth of his filmography's philosophical explorations. Perhaps the most powerful recurring theme in Chaplin's work, and one which resonates especially strong knowing the man's life story, is a rally against judgment, a call to look towards the heart of people rather than mock, disenfranchise, or ignore them due to appearance or economic status. The theme is most effectively explored in Chaplin's greatest masterpiece, 1931's City Lights, which explores the contrast between visual sight and actual seeing in the tramp's dual friendships, one with a lonely millionaire who greatly enjoys the tramp's company when drunk, but is appalled by the tramp's appearance when sober, and the other with a blind flower girl the tramp shows kindness towards, and sees that kindness repaid in the form of true recognition at the film's end, when the flower girl, her sight restored, recognizes Chaplin's character not as a tramp, but as the man who acted so selflessly towards her. Critic James Agee believed this sequence contained the greatest single piece of acting ever committed to celluloid, and this closing image, of the tramp sheepishly biting his nails, remains one of the most enduring and iconic shots in all of film history. This is an ethic of equality, an assertion that who we are and what we are capable of is something that exists separate from status, station, or appearance. It is paramount to Chaplin's ethics as a storyteller. Yet no scene in Chaplin's filmography so powerfully summarizes these ideas as this sequence from The Gold Rush, in which the tramp waits in vain for Georgia, the woman he loves, who has disingenuously promised to come have dinner with him on New Year's Eve, a cruel joke played at the tramp's expense. The intercutting here, between the tramp alone in his cabin and Georgia and the townsfolk celebrating in the local tavern to the tune of Auld Lang Syne, turns Georgia's insensitivity towards the tramp into a powerful symbol for society's insensitivity towards those who are outcast or otherized. It is, to me, one of the saddest scenes ever committed to film, a moment in which pathos and ethics harmonize flawlessly to emotionally crushing effect. Chaplin's economic themes mirror and expand upon these philosophical, interpersonal ones. His 1936 film Modern Times saw the tramp working in a factory and explored the mechanization of the human body, the dehumanization of the American worker, and the gap between the American dream and the American reality, all through the eyes of two characters, the tramp and a young gamine, whose optimism and belief in each other allow them to move forward, even when they literally have nothing. Chaplin was interested, here and in other films, not only in how people of a lower economic class saw themselves, but how they perceived the seemingly desirable lives of the wealthy. In this fantasy sequence, where the tramp and the gamine imagine cozy upper-middle-class lives for themselves, notice how every detail of the scenario revolves around self-sufficiency. The characters want for nothing, are utterly comfortable and happy, and need not even walk outside to get their milk. The cow comes right to them. The suffering, toil, and stress of poverty's day-to-day struggle has been replaced by complete and utter comfort, an absence of all the labor that defines them in reality. Chaplin's 1921 feature The Kid contemplates this idea in even darker terms, as Chaplin's character, after having his adopted son taken away by the state, falls asleep and dreams of heaven, but is only able to imagine such a place in the confines of his own status quo, as a mildly nicer version of the impoverished street he lives on, where all the problems that follow him in life, bullies, unsympathetic cops, and want, persist in this other world. In Chaplin's films, the reality and psyche of economic hardship is as difficult to escape externally as it is internally. When pondered in a thoroughly unequal world, even imagined equality seems to have boundaries. It is an idea that feels intensely personal, something Chaplin would have genuinely experienced, having lived the lives he dramatizes as a child. Chaplin's ethical and political musings culminated most forcefully in his 1940 feature The Great Dictator, where these myriad ideas are applied to a global political scale, ruthlessly satirizing Adolf Hitler and the bigotry of Nazi Germany over a full year before the United States would enter World War II, and at a time when many Americans still openly sympathized with the Nazi agenda. It was an utterly brave film to make, the kind of risk only an artist of Chaplin's stature could take, but few at his level ever would. Boldest was the film's conclusion, in which Chaplin faces the camera directly, breaking character and interrupting the flow of the story to deliver a stirring 6-minute speech denouncing nationalism, hatred, and warfare, ideas attentive viewers of Chaplin's films would know had always been on the director's mind, but would be delivered in no uncertain terms here, and which would be heavily controversial as a result.
I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost.
If the ethics of Charlie Chaplin's art seemed perfectly in balance, his personal life was more complex. As a filmmaker, Chaplin was a demanding perfectionist, and therefore could be cruel or inconsiderate towards his co-workers. He had many lapses in judgment when it came to romance, with both of his first two marriages forced by impregnating 16-year-old actresses, and he was accused by multiple wives of infidelity, though most of the more extreme accusations against him have since been proven or admitted to be untrue. Chaplin was not necessarily uncharitable, though he did not exercise his social or ethical beliefs in the form of philanthropy, and it was not until his 50s that Chaplin seemed able to truly settle down and live the quiet, contented life he seemed to desire all along. As for his expulsion from the United States in the 1950s, due in part to his openly socialist leanings, I shall make no judgments here, though I would suggest that any other set of politics would be entirely out of keeping with Chaplin's character and beliefs, something one only need watch his films to understand. In any case, Chaplin is upfront about his failings in his writings, neither falsely modest nor incapable of self-criticism, and strives, as honestly as he can, to illustrate the circumstances, people, and places that made him the man he was. "I am what I am," he wrote, "an individual, unique and different, with a lineal history of ancestral promptings and urgings, a history of dreams, desires, and special experiences, of all of which I am the sum total." His is a story worth learning from, the tale of a boy raised in poverty, who quickly achieved unprecedented fame and fortune, and yet never forgot the trials of his youth, whose ethics came from experience, and whose ambitions lay in personal fulfillment, who dramatized the issues he considered most important in a form people all over the world could enjoy and be enlightened by, and who leaves us today with a profound message of equality, social, political, and interpersonal, to ponder and learn from for generations to come.